I remember the moment like it's stitched into my heartbeat. I was cleaning his side of the closet, something I rarely did because he was so particular about his space. But that day, sunlight poured through the curtains in that lazy, golden way, and I thought, why not? Maybe I'd surprise him. Maybe I'd just feel closer to him by touching the things he touched every day. I slid open the wooden door, and that's when I saw it, a dress. My breath caught before my mind even processed what I was looking at. It was white. Soft. Lacy. The kind of dress little girls imagine when they dream about growing up and saying I do. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining it, maybe the light was playing tricks on me. But no, it was real. Hanging there. Neatly pressed. Beautiful. And too big. 2 sizes too big. That's when my pulse started to hammer. My fingers trembled as I reached out, brushing the delicate lace that felt almost alive. I wanted to believe it was for me. I wanted to believe he'd been planning something sweet, a surprise proposal, a secret he was dying to share. But then my mind twisted around another thought, one I didn't want to say out loud. What if it wasn't for me at all? I froze there, half crouched in the golden light spilling from the window. I could smell his cologne on the jacket beside the dress, faint but familiar, that warm, safe scent that had always felt like home. And yet, at that moment, everything about it felt foreign. Wrong. Like the air had shifted, heavy with something unsaid. I stared at the dress again, tracing every little detail, the lace sleeves, the beaded neckline, the ribbon that tied so perfectly at the waist. Who did it fit? Why was it here, hidden behind his things? He wasn't careless. He never left things lying around. Every item had a place, a reason. So why this? My thoughts spiraled faster than I could catch them. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear myself breathe. Was it a joke? Was he planning to surprise me? Was it something I wasn't supposed to see? I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky, unsure. My chest ached with questions. Maybe it was his sister's. Maybe it belonged to someone else in his family. That would make sense, right? That would explain everything. But deep down, a whisper I couldn't silence kept asking, what if it wasn't that simple? And as I stood there, frozen between curiosity and dread, the closet door creaked slightly behind me. A draft swept through the room, and for a heartbeat, I imagined him walking in, seeing me there, seeing what I'd found. Would he smile and explain? Or would his eyes darken, realizing the secret was out? I didn't know it yet, but finding that dress would change everything, not just between us, but inside me. Because sometimes, the things we discover when we're not supposed to look are the ones that rewrite our whole story. My name's Emma, and 6 months ago, I moved in with Daniel. I still remember that day like a photograph that never fades, boxes stacked higher than my patience, mismatched furniture, and our clumsy dance around the apartment as we tried to make it ours. The walls were bare, the floor squeaked, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. But it was ours. We'd talked about it for weeks before it happened, what it would mean to share space, to wake up beside each other every day, to blend our lives not just in love but in toothpaste brands and grocery lists. I was nervous, I won't lie. Daniel was the calm one, the kind who always found a joke to smooth over the awkward edges of life. "Relax, Em," he said that morning, balancing a box labeled kitchen on one arm and smiling like a kid. "If we can survive IKEA furniture, we can survive anything." I laughed, even though my hands were shaking as I taped up another box. It wasn't fear exactly, it was something softer, like standing on the edge of a dream and hoping it's as beautiful as you imagined. When we finally carried the last box through the door, we stood there for a moment just looking at each other, both sweaty and exhausted, but glowing. The sunlight filtered through the half-open blinds, painting stripes across his face. He leaned in, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Welcome home." That night, we sat on the living room floor surrounded by takeout boxes and bubble wrap, eating noodles straight from the carton because neither of us had found the plates yet. He made me laugh so hard I nearly spilled soy sauce on the carpet. And that laughter, it was the kind that fills a room, that makes ordinary air feel like magic. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of him humming in the kitchen. I followed the smell of burnt toast and bad coffee, and there he was, shirtless, messy-haired, grinning like he'd just invented breakfast. "Good morning, roommate," he teased, handing me a mug. It wasn't just coffee. It was a beginning. We were still figuring each other out, the toothpaste habits, the late-night snacks, the way he liked the windows open even when it was freezing, and how I couldn't fall asleep unless I heard the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Our days weren't perfect, but they were real. He'd leave his socks in weird places, and I'd leave hair ties everywhere. He liked country music, I couldn't stand it. I liked my books stacked neatly, he thought books looked better scattered. But somehow, the chaos made sense. There were small, quiet moments that made everything feel right, brushing our teeth side by side, bumping elbows in front of the mirror, sharing toothpaste because we'd both forgotten to buy more. Those tiny things, they became the rhythm of our days, the heartbeat of our little world. Evenings were my favorite. He'd come home tired, his tie loosened, his hair ruffled from running his hands through it too many times. I'd already be cooking something half-edible, pretending to follow a recipe when really I was just guessing. He'd lean against the counter, watching me with that lazy smile that made my knees weak, and say, "Smells like love, or danger." I'd roll my eyes, throw a dish towel at him, and he'd catch it, laughing. We had our routines, Friday pizza nights, Sunday morning pancakes, and our sacred, no phone after 8 p.m. rule, which we broke constantly but always promised to try again. We'd lie on the couch, tangled up in each other, watching bad movies and whispering about our future in between the lines of the dialogue. Once, I asked him what his dream life looked like. He thought for a moment and said, "You. Just you, anywhere." And I remember thinking that if love had a sound, it would be that, quiet, steady, certain. There was something about Daniel that made life feel lighter. He wasn't perfect, he could be moody, stubborn, sometimes distant when work got to him. But he was also kind in the little ways that mattered most. He'd remember how I liked my coffee, extra milk, no sugar. He'd fix the squeaky cabinet door without being asked. He'd kiss the top of my head when I was lost in thought, just to pull me back. We learned to read each other in silence, the difference between his tired sigh and his frustrated one, between my nervous laugh and my real laugh. We built a language that only we understood. Our apartment, though small, felt alive. It was messy, imperfect, and constantly buzzing with the kind of warmth that doesn't come from heaters or lamps, but from love that's lived in. The window blinds cast soft lines of light across our mornings, the fridge was always half empty but filled with memories, leftover pizza, sticky notes, grocery lists with doodles. Sometimes, I'd catch him just watching me, when I was folding laundry, or reading, or humming to myself while doing dishes. He'd look at me like he was memorizing something fragile. I'd ask, "What?" and he'd shake his head and say, "Nothing. Just, you." And every time he said it, I believed him a little more. Love made even the messiest days beautiful. It made the burnt toast worth laughing about, the late-night arguments worth forgiving, the tired mornings worth waking up for. We weren't perfect, no couple is, but we were trying. And that felt like enough. When I think back on those first months, I see sunlight. I see warmth. I see the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way our laughter echoed off the bare walls until the apartment didn't feel empty anymore. I didn't know then that there were shadows waiting at the edges of that light. That behind the closet door, behind his easy smile and my trusting heart, something was quietly waiting, something that would test everything we'd built. But for now, in those early days, we were just Emma and Daniel, two imperfect souls trying to build a perfect little world. And for a while, we actually believed we could. We were love in its simplest form: morning coffee and shared silence, mismatched socks and warm embraces, laughter spilling into the night. We didn't need much to be happy. Just each other. Just this tiny, beautiful mess we called home. And maybe that's why it hurt so much when the truth finally came, because love, once pure and whole, doesn't break cleanly. It shatters, quietly, in all the places where you once felt safe. But that's another part of the story. For now, this is where it all still felt perfect. Living together wasn't perfect, but it was ours. It wasn't the kind of perfection you see in movies, where every morning starts with fresh flowers and neatly made beds. No, ours was the kind that looked like mismatched mugs, unmade sheets, and half-laughs between mouthfuls of cereal. The kind of perfection you only realize when you look back and think, those were the days I felt most alive. Daniel had this way of making even the smallest things feel like something worth remembering. I used to wake up early for work, and some mornings I'd find a little yellow sticky note waiting for me on the cereal box. Sometimes it was silly: "Don't forget to eat something green today." Sometimes it was sweet: "You're my favorite reason to wake up." But every time, it made me smile before my day had even begun. And I guess I wanted to return the favor in my own quiet ways. So I started leaving notes for him too, tucked into places I knew he'd find them when I wasn't around. A quick "you've got this" inside his wallet before a big meeting. A tiny heart drawn on the lid of his coffee cup. Once, I even hid a note in his shoe that said, "You walk into my heart every day." I remember hearing him laugh from the hallway when he found it. He shouted, "Emma, you're ridiculous," but when I peeked out, he was smiling like he'd just been handed the world. That was us, always finding ways to say "I love you" without actually saying it out loud. It wasn't grand gestures or diamond promises. It was quiet, consistent, and beautifully ordinary. We had a rhythm, Daniel and I. On weekends, we'd cook together, or at least, try to. He'd turn on some old playlist, something soft and easy, and we'd dance around the kitchen like idiots while flour covered everything but the actual bowl. Once, he tried to flip a pancake and ended up with half of it stuck to the ceiling. We laughed so hard we forgot to eat for almost an hour. There was something sacred about those small, messy moments. They made our little apartment feel alive, filled with echoes of laughter and warmth that clung to the walls long after the music stopped. Sometimes, on slow evenings, we'd just sit by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. He'd hold me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder, and we'd talk about everything, and nothing. Dreams, fears, memories, plans we weren't sure we'd ever keep. It was in those quiet talks that I felt closest to him, like we were building something invisible between us, not just a relationship, but a life stitched together one heartbeat at a time. He'd always find new ways to make me laugh. Like the time he replaced the sugar with salt just to see my reaction when I took my first sip of coffee. I nearly choked, and he couldn't stop laughing. I chased him around the apartment with the sugar jar, pretending to be furious, but inside I was melting. Every day, we were writing our own kind of story, one smile at a time. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that made it beautiful. The way he'd reach for my hand while driving. The way he'd tuck a strand of hair behind my ear when I was rambling. The way he'd hum under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. It was like he didn't just exist in my life, he existed with it. Sometimes, when I'd be getting ready for bed, I'd look around at the small traces of him everywhere: his watch on the nightstand, his half-finished glass of water, his hoodie draped over the chair, and I'd feel this soft ache in my chest. The good kind. The kind that tells you you're exactly where you're meant to be. I didn't know then that love, even when it feels safe, can still be fragile. I didn't know that one hidden truth could unravel everything we'd built. But back then, in those golden hours of our little world, none of that existed. There was just us, laughing, loving, living one sticky note and burnt pancake at a time. If I could go back, I'd freeze those moments. The sound of his laughter echoing through the kitchen. The smell of coffee in the morning. The warmth of his hand resting on mine. Because sometimes, it's not the big things that hold a relationship together. It's the cereal box notes, the inside jokes, the quiet moments when you catch their eyes and know, this is love, in its simplest, truest form. And for a while, it was enough. It was everything. It was one of those slow, gray afternoons where the rain never really stops, just keeps whispering against the windows, steady and soft, like the sky's breathing. The kind of day that makes you want to curl up under a blanket with tea and pretend the world outside doesn't exist. Daniel was at work, and the apartment felt heavier than usual, filled with the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic muffled by rain. I remember shivering a little. The heater hadn't kicked in yet, and I went to look for the old gray blanket we kept in the closet. The one Daniel always joked was ugly but loyal. I pulled open the door, expecting to see the mess of jackets and scarves, maybe one of his work suits hanging slightly out of place. But instead, my eyes caught something unexpected. Something white. At first, I thought it was a shirt, maybe one of his pressed office ones that had slipped out of the garment bag. But as I moved closer, I realized it wasn't that at all. The light from the window hit it just right, catching the faint shimmer beneath the plastic wrap. I stepped closer, and the sight made my breath hitch. A dress. Not just any dress, a wedding dress. Elegant, ivory white, the kind of beauty that makes time stop for a moment. It hung there perfectly, the plastic wrapping soft against the lace, as though it was waiting for something. Or someone. I reached out before I could think, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the delicate fabric. The lace felt cool, smooth, too real, too deliberate to be accidental. My heart started pounding in my chest, heavy, uneven. It didn't make sense. Why would he have a wedding dress? My mind scrambled for explanations, trying to find something, anything, that would make it make sense. Maybe he bought it as a surprise. Maybe he was planning something, maybe this was how he wanted to propose. My heart lifted for half a second at the thought, Daniel, the hopeless romantic, trying to surprise me in his quiet, secretive way. But then I noticed the tag. It was from my favorite designer. The one I'd mentioned months ago when we'd passed by that bridal boutique downtown. I remembered pointing at a dress in the window and laughing, saying something like, if I ever get married, that's the one I'd want. And Daniel had smiled and said, good to know. That memory should have made me smile, but instead, my stomach twisted. Because when I looked closer, when I squinted at the tag dangling from the delicate thread, I saw it, the size. And it wasn't mine. My throat tightened. I checked again, just to be sure, as if maybe my eyes were lying. But they weren't. 2 sizes too big. 2 whole sizes. I stood there frozen, the soft patter of rain filling the silence, my reflection faintly visible in the mirror beside the closet. I looked small. Confused. A stranger in my own home. For a moment, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe he'd made a mistake. Maybe he'd gotten the wrong size, he wasn't exactly an expert on women's clothing. But the longer I stared at it, the less that explanation held. Daniel was careful about everything. Precise. He noticed details others didn't. He'd know. My thoughts started spinning, faster and faster, until they blurred together. Did he buy it for someone else? An ex? Someone he couldn't let go of? Or, was it somehow for me? The questions echoed in my mind like footsteps in an empty hallway. Each one heavier than the last. I couldn't breathe right. I backed away from the closet, wrapping my arms around myself like I could somehow keep the world from falling apart if I just held tight enough. I wanted to call him. To ask. But my voice, it wouldn't come. I could already hear how it would sound, desperate, accusing, afraid. and I didn't want to be any of those things. Not yet. Not until I knew. So I stood there, staring at the white dress glimmering faintly in the half-light, while outside, the rain fell harder. The sound filled the room, soft but relentless, like the universe whispering something I wasn't ready to hear. I touched the lace again, softer this time, and whispered, almost to myself, "Who are you for?" But of course, it didn't answer. It just hung there, silent, perfect, haunting. And in that silence, something shifted inside me. A tiny crack. The kind you don't notice at first, not until it spreads, quietly, into everything you thought was safe. That was the moment everything changed, though I didn't know it yet. The moment a single hidden secret began to unravel the life I thought I knew. And all it took was one white dress. The rest of the day felt like a blur I couldn't escape from. My mind refused to quiet down, looping over the same image, that white dress, hanging so still, as if mocking me with its silence. I tried to do normal things, folded laundry, washed the dishes, even turned on the TV for background noise. But none of it worked. My hands kept trembling. My chest felt tight, like I'd swallowed a secret I couldn't digest. Every sound in the apartment startled me. The creak of the floorboards. The hum of the fridge. Even the rain against the windows sounded louder, sharper. It was like the whole world had turned into a reminder that something wasn't right. When Daniel texted me that he was on his way home, my heart jumped. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over, as if there was a hidden meaning between those simple words, "Be home soon." "You want anything?" I typed out, "No, I'm good," and then deleted it. Wrote it again. Deleted it again. Finally, I just sent a thumbs up emoji, the kind of meaningless response you give when you don't trust your own voice. After that, I sat on the couch with a book I couldn't read, eyes fixed on the same paragraph for what felt like hours. The room was dim now, the rain outside glowing faintly in the amber light from the street lamp. The clock ticked too loudly. My heartbeat synced with it, every second dragging slower than the last. When the door finally opened, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Daniel's voice filled the apartment like it always did, warm, casual, familiar. "Hey, Em," he called, his footsteps soft against the floor. "You wouldn't believe the traffic today. Total nightmare." He came into the living room carrying grocery bags, smiling that easy smile that used to calm me instantly. But this time, it didn't. It only made my stomach twist. I looked up from the book, pretending to be surprised. "Hey. You're back early." He laughed, setting the bags on the counter. "Early? It's almost 7. You lose track of time again." I forced a smile, but my throat was dry. I nodded and said something, I don't even remember what, about the rain. Something safe. Something ordinary. He talked for a bit, about work, about the grocery store running out of his favorite cereal, about how he'd finally remembered to get the light bulbs for the kitchen. I watched him move around the apartment, the way he opened cabinets, the way he smiled when he finally found a clean mug. And all the while, that single image kept flashing behind my eyes, the white dress, glimmering in the dark of his closet. I wanted to ask him. God, I wanted to ask so badly. The words sat heavy on my tongue. "Daniel, why do you have that dress? Who is it for?" But every time I opened my mouth, my courage dissolved into silence. Instead, I said, "You look tired." He looked up from the counter then, eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, something flickered there. Something I couldn't name. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah," he said softly. "Long day." He moved closer, brushed a kiss against my forehead, and I froze. Not because of the kiss, but because of the quiet that followed it. That strange, loaded quiet that made the air feel heavier. He lingered for just a second too long, studying me the way someone studies a locked door, like he was wondering what I was hiding behind it. And that's when it hit me, he knew. Somehow, he knew I'd found it. The realization crawled up my spine, slow and cold. I tried to act normal, to pretend everything was fine, but my body betrayed me. My shoulders stiffened. My voice came out too soft when I asked, "Did you eat?" He smiled again, that same careful smile, and said, "Not yet. Let's order something." I nodded, grateful for the distraction, even as my hands shook slightly when I reached for my phone. He didn't mention the dress. I didn't mention the dress. But it hung between us like a ghost, unseen, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. We ate dinner together, making small talk about nothing, both of us pretending that everything was normal. The rain kept falling outside, steady and rhythmic, masking the silence that kept growing inside our little apartment. Later that night, when he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake listening to his breathing. Slow. Calm. Peaceful. But all I could think about was the dress, and the way he looked at me when he walked through the door. Like a man who knew his secret wasn't a secret anymore. That evening, just as the rain finally began to fade into a quiet drizzle, Daniel came into the living room with a strange light in his eyes. I was still pretending to read, my thoughts drifting somewhere far from the words on the page. He leaned against the doorway and said softly, almost casually, "Get dressed, Em. Something nice. We're going out." I looked up, startled. Out? Where? He smiled, that same easy, careful smile he always used when he wanted to keep something secret. Somewhere special. My stomach fluttered, though not entirely from excitement. I tried to match his tone, to sound normal. "What's the occasion?" "You'll see," he said, his voice gentle but firm, the kind of tone that made it impossible to argue. So I nodded. And when he left the room, I sat there for a long minute, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The city lights blurred against the glass, tiny stars caught in the rain. Somewhere deep down, I felt a strange ache, part fear, part longing. When I finally stood to get ready, I reached for the dark blue dress he always said he loved on me. As I slipped it on, my hands shook just a little. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the dress in his closet still haunting my thoughts, or maybe it was the way he'd looked at me earlier, like he was holding a secret behind his smile. We drove in silence. The sound of the wipers brushing against the windshield filled the car, steady and slow. The city lights faded as we left downtown, replaced by the open stretch of road that led toward the lake. The air smelled of wet pavement and pine. Neither of us spoke, but I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing between us. He parked in front of the little lakeside restaurant, our restaurant, the one where we'd had our first date. The one with the soft string lights tangled in the trees and the water shimmering nearby like a sheet of glass. Seeing it again tugged at something in my chest. "Here?" I asked softly. He just nodded, smiling faintly. Felt right. Inside, the place was almost empty. The waiter recognized us immediately, or maybe he just recognized the way we looked at each other, like people who had too much history to fit into a single meal. They seated us by the window, where the reflection of the lake danced across the glass. Dinner passed in small, quiet moments. The sound of silverware. The flicker of candlelight. His hand brushing mine across the table once or twice, a touch so light it almost didn't feel real. I tried to study his face, to find something there, a clue, a confession, but all I saw was calm. Too calm. Over dessert, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. My pulse quickened. He didn't say anything at first, just turned it in his hands, like he was deciding whether or not to give it to me. Finally, he slid it across the table. "This is for you." I hesitated. The envelope felt too light in my hand, almost fragile. I looked at him, but he only nodded, encouraging. "Go on," he said softly. I opened it carefully, unfolding the paper inside. At first, I thought it was just a photograph, but when I looked closer, my breath caught in my throat. It was us. Daniel and me. Sitting on this same lakeside patio, the same string lights glowing above us, the same water shimmering behind us, except, it wasn't now. It wasn't taken tonight. In the photo, my hair was longer. His face was a little older. The clothes we wore were ones I'd never seen before. It looked like the future. The date printed in tiny numbers at the corner read June 18th, 10 years from now. I blinked, my mind spinning. What is this? He smiled, that soft, wistful smile that always made my heart ache. It's us, he said. Where we'll be. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. I looked from the picture to him, searching his face for an explanation that made sense. But there was something in his expression, something deep and unspoken, like he was both happy and heartbroken all at once. My voice trembled. Daniel, why are you showing me this? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached across the table, taking my hand gently in his. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, slow, steady, as if memorizing the feel of my skin. Because, he whispered, eyes glistening in the candlelight, sometimes the future comes sooner than we think. And in that moment, with the flickering lights reflecting in his eyes, with the photograph trembling in my hands, I felt it. Something was ending. I didn't know what, or why. Only that somehow, that photo wasn't a promise. It was a goodbye dressed as one. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. My fingers trembled as I held it up to the flickering candlelight, watching the edges of the glossy paper shimmer. It was us, Daniel and me, standing in front of a small white chapel bathed in golden sunlight. He was in a navy blue suit, smiling the same quiet, knowing smile I'd fallen in love with. I was in a wedding dress, that wedding dress. The same one I'd found in his closet. The same lace, the same soft, flowing fabric that had haunted my thoughts for days. For a moment, the world tilted. I couldn't breathe. My heart raced, my pulse thundered in my ears, and all I could whisper was, Daniel, this isn't real. He didn't say anything right away. He just watched me, his expression soft and unreadable, like he was waiting for me to see something more than what was on the surface. I looked down again, my thumb brushing over the image. It looked so alive, so possible. The sunlight in the photo filtered through trees I didn't recognize, and in the background, there was a sign that read, St. Vincent Chapel. My own handwriting was scrawled on the corner of the picture, a date I didn't remember writing. I looked up, my voice barely holding together. This is us. At a wedding. Wearing, my throat tightened. The same dress. He nodded slowly, that soft smile never fading. Yes, he said quietly. That's us. My hand started shaking again. Daniel, where did this come from? How, why? He reached across the table, taking my hand gently in his. His fingers were warm, steady, grounding me even as my world spun. Before I tell you, he said, just breathe, okay? I nodded weakly, though my chest felt tight, my heart fluttering in fear and confusion. He leaned back slightly, eyes still on mine, the candlelight dancing across his face. I had it made, he said softly. The photo. I designed it myself. My lips parted, but no sound came out. You, what? He smiled then, almost sheepishly. I know how it sounds. Crazy, right? But I did it months ago. I found this small design studio online that creates digital composites, photos that look real, even if they aren't. I sent them our pictures, the background, everything. I just wanted something to hold on to. I stared at him, trying to make sense of it. You made a fake photo of our wedding. He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Yeah. Because I wanted to see it. To believe in it. The silence between us stretched thin, fragile but full of meaning. I looked back at the picture, my heart aching in ways I couldn't explain. It was so detailed, the way he was holding me, the soft curve of my smile, the sunlight glinting off the lace. It didn't look fake. It looked real. Like a memory waiting to happen. I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. Why didn't you just tell me? Why hide it? He exhaled slowly, eyes flickering down to our intertwined hands. Because it wasn't ready yet. We weren't ready yet. He paused, his voice softening. I know how you are, Em. You'd have asked 100 questions. You'd have tried to plan everything, worry about everything. And I didn't want this to become another task on your to-do list. I wanted to dream a little. Quietly. My throat tightened. The words hit something deep inside me, a tender place I didn't realize I'd been guarding. The dress, I whispered. You had that made too. He nodded again, his eyes shining now, the faintest glimmer of emotion breaking through his calm. Yeah. I asked the designer to make it for you, your size back then, not now. I wanted it to be something we could grow into together. I thought maybe, one day, when the time felt right, I'd surprise you. I wanted you to have it, to see it and know that this is where I was headed. That no matter what happens, I'm building toward us. Tears burned my eyes before I could stop them. I looked down at the photo again, my vision blurring. The image, which only minutes ago had felt like a betrayal, now looked like something else entirely. Not a lie. Not a secret. But a promise. I touched the picture gently, tracing the outline of our faces. You made this, to remember what you're working toward. He smiled softly. Exactly. Every time I felt lost, I'd look at it and remind myself, that's the goal. That's where we're going. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. It wasn't about the wedding. It was about the life after it. The future I want with you. My breath caught. The tears I'd been holding back slipped free, falling onto the photograph. I wiped them quickly, laughing through the ache. You're unbelievable, I whispered. You scared me half to death, you know that. He laughed softly, the tension finally breaking. Yeah, I figured. You were quiet all day. I could tell you'd seen it. Then why didn't you say anything? He reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek. Because I wanted you to find out tonight. Here. Where it all started. I thought maybe, it would make sense then. And it did. It made sense in the quietest, most heartbreaking way. The dress, the photo, the silence, it all came together like puzzle pieces that had been scattered across days of doubt and confusion. I looked at him, really looked at him, the way his eyes softened when he smiled, the faint dimples that appeared when he was trying to be serious but couldn't quite manage it. My heart swelled with something heavy and beautiful all at once. The rain outside had stopped completely now. Through the window, the lake shimmered under the soft glow of the string lights. The reflection of the candles flickered across the water, warm and golden. I glanced back at the photo, then at him, and for the first time in days, I felt my shoulders relax. The dress wasn't a secret anymore. It wasn't a mystery hiding in the dark. It was hope, hope stitched into lace, sealed inside a dream he'd built piece by piece, waiting for the right moment to share it. He squeezed my hand, his voice barely a whisper. One day, when we get there, I want to take that same photo, for real. Same place, same light, same us. I smiled through my tears, nodding. Then we'd better make it there, I said softly. And as the candles flickered between us, I realized something I'd nearly forgotten in my fear. Love isn't always about what's already happened. Sometimes, it's about what's waiting just beyond the horizon, the future we dare to believe in, even before it exists. For a long time, we just sat there, hands intertwined across the table, the soft glow of candlelight flickering between us like it was breathing for the both of us. The restaurant had grown quiet, the hum of other diners fading into the background until all I could hear was the steady rhythm of our hearts, somehow in sync despite everything. I looked down at the photograph again, still glistening faintly where my tears had fallen. The edges had curled slightly from the warmth of my hands. That image, the one that had once terrified me, now felt like a promise so beautiful it almost hurt to look at. I realized then that love isn't just about saying yes at the altar. It's not the vows spoken under chandeliers or the applause that follows a kiss. Love, the real kind, lives quietly in the moments before any of that happens, in the silent hopes, in the things we build in secret, in the dreams we carry for each other long before the world knows. It's in the notes left on cereal boxes. In the laughter that fills a kitchen covered in flour. In the small, wordless gestures that say, I see you. I choose you. Every day. And now, sitting across from Daniel, I could see all those moments lined up behind us, tiny, ordinary promises we'd been making without even realizing it. Each one was a thread, weaving us closer, stitching our lives together in ways deeper than rings or ceremonies ever could. He squeezed my hand lightly, pulling me back to the present. His eyes met mine, soft and full of that quiet intensity that always disarmed me. There was no grand speech, no perfect line rehearsed for the moment. Just him, honest, nervous, and full of love. I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten with emotion I couldn't contain. My voice came out barely a whisper. You're already making me say yes. His smile broke through, not the teasing grin I'd grown used to, but something deeper. Something raw. The kind of smile that said this matters. He didn't say anything right away, he just looked at me, eyes glistening in the candlelight, like he was memorizing the moment. And maybe he was. Because I was, too. The waiter came by once, quietly setting the bill on the table, but we barely noticed. The world outside kept moving, cars passing by, wind rippling across the lake, the faint murmur of laughter from another table, but inside that little bubble of light, time stood still. When we finally stood to leave, Daniel helped me with my coat, his hand brushing the back of my neck gently, the way he always did when he wanted me to know I was safe. We walked out beneath the string lights, our reflections swaying softly in the puddles left by the rain. The air smelled of damp earth and lilacs, and for once, I didn't need answers or explanations. I already had what mattered. He opened the car door for me, just like he did on our first date, and as we drove home, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence between us had changed, no longer heavy with secrets, but full of something tender and true. Back home, he went straight to wash up while I lingered in the bedroom. I found myself drawn to the closet again, that same spot where everything had started. The room was dark except for the sliver of moonlight filtering through the curtains. I opened the door slowly, my breath catching as the faint glow touched the edge of white lace. The dress hung there, still wrapped carefully, untouched, but now it looked different. It wasn't a secret anymore. It wasn't something to fear. It was a promise, of love, of patience, of the future we hadn't reached yet but were already building toward. I reached out and brushed my fingers against the fabric, just like I had that first day. Only this time, I didn't tremble. I smiled. Because now, I understood. The dress wasn't just fabric and thread. It was hope, fragile, handmade, and deeply human. It was the story of two people who didn't need perfection, just faith in each other. I closed the closet gently, letting the moonlight spill across the floor, soft and golden. Somewhere in the distance, Daniel's voice drifted from the kitchen, humming that old tune he always did when he thought I wasn't listening. I smiled through the tears that still clung to my lashes. Love wasn't the mystery I thought it was. It wasn't about finding the right moment or waiting for the right words. It was this, quiet, imperfect, full of belief. I turned off the light, letting the last glow from the window fall over the closed closet door, the faint shimmer of lace barely visible through the gap. And in that stillness, I could almost hear the echo of his words at dinner, soft and certain. Sometimes the future comes sooner than we think. Maybe he was right. Because that night, in the glow of candlelight and moonlight, I didn't need a proposal or a promise written in ink. I'd already said yes, in 1,000 quiet ways, long before the question was ever asked. Sometimes love isn't loud. It doesn't crash into your life like thunder or announce itself in grand gestures for the world to see. More often, it hides, quietly, deliberately, in the corners of ordinary days. It whispers through laughter shared over burnt toast, through fingers brushing across a kitchen counter, through notes left on cereal boxes that say, "You're my favorite reason to wake up." That night, as we walked home beneath the soft glow of city lights, everything felt a little slower, a little lighter. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the streets shining like mirrors. Our reflections followed us in the puddles, two silhouettes moving side by side, fingers laced, hearts steady. Neither of us spoke for a while. The sound of our footsteps, the faint hum of the city, the rhythm of our breaths, that was enough. Every few steps, he'd glance at me and smile, that small, quiet kind of smile that holds 1,000 unsaid things. I didn't need him to say them. I already knew. I remember looking at him then and thinking about how much of love exists in the silence, in all the moments where nothing needs to be said, because the feeling speaks louder than words ever could. When we reached home, the apartment greeted us like an old friend, soft light spilling from the lamps, the faint smell of coffee still lingering from earlier. I slipped off my shoes and turned back to him. He was watching me, his eyes gentle, his hands still in his pockets like he didn't quite know what to do with them. For a second, I saw him the way I had on our very first day together, nervous, hopeful, trying his best to love me right. And I realized he always had. From the moment we moved in together, through the laughter, the clutter, the quiet nights, he'd been building something I didn't even notice, a future that included me at every corner. He didn't need to ask if I'd say yes one day, he was already making sure that I would never have a reason to say no. I thought of the photograph again, that impossible image of us, standing in front of the chapel that didn't yet exist in our timeline. The sunlight. The lace. The way he'd held me, both in that photo and in life. He hadn't made it to trick me or to rush me into a promise. He made it to remind himself that love, when it's real, deserves a direction. The dress, the photo, the dinner, all of it wasn't about an engagement or a proposal. It was about faith. His faith in us. And I realized that's what love really is, faith. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that quietly stays. The kind that plans without pressure, that hopes without demanding, that believes without proof. I walked to the closet once more before bed. The moonlight poured across the floor like liquid silver, and the dress, that same white dress, glowed softly in its place. It no longer looked mysterious or haunting. It looked alive. It looked loved. I smiled, brushing the fabric gently one last time before closing the door. One day, I whispered. Not as a question. Not even as a wish. Just as a truth that was already unfolding. When I turned back, Daniel was leaning in the doorway, watching me with that same patient look. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. "More than okay." He walked over, wrapping his arms around me, pressing his forehead against mine. And in that quiet moment, with the city humming outside and the faint sound of rainwater dripping from the gutters, I realized something simple and profound. Love doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need perfection. It doesn't even need words. It just needs two people willing to keep showing up, even when it's raining, even when it's quiet, even when the world doesn't notice. Sometimes love is a photograph that hasn't been taken yet. Sometimes it's a dream hanging quietly in a closet, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who plans a future before asking for it, don't let them go. Because in the end, love isn't about waiting for the perfect day, it's about building one, piece by piece, promise by promise, until one day you realize you've already been living your yes all along. As we turned off the lights that night, the glow from the city washed softly across our faces. Daniel reached for my hand under the covers, and I smiled into the darkness. Sometimes, the quietest moments say the most. And that night, I didn't need to speak. My heart already had. If this story made you believe in quiet love, the kind that speaks in glances and promises rather than words, tell me below, would you say yes too? Ring. And if you believe love still lives in the smallest moments, subscribe to CineVerse Love Stories for more tales where love hides in the unexpected.